Relationships are what open doors of opportunity. It's what creates opportunity. And it's not just the first time you meet someone, it's that cultivated, repetitive, intentional investment in a relationship that really, in my opinion, is an important aspect of who you are as an innovator. And I would say the most innovative people I know, too, which are sitting here, are people that embody, relationship building. This is Innovation Currency. My name is Leigh-Ann Buchanan, and I am your host. What I want this podcast to help people see about themselves is that innovation is for everyone, and everyone is an innovator. I developed a simple test, a quiz, if you will, to help anyone discover their hidden innovation traits from across 4 specific domains: disruptor, connector, distributor, and influencer. If you haven't already taken the quiz, please stop, take a pause, and go by visiting my website, www.leighanbuchanan.com/innovator quiz. Why don't you start off by introducing yourself, saying your name, and what value are you adding to the world?
Okay, so my name is Nadia Payan, and the value that I'm adding to the world, I would say, is creativity.
In what way?
All the ways.
Okay, we're gonna go.
We're gonna come back to
yes.
it. Yeah. That was totally a lead-in.
Oof, I love it.
Nice. I'm Aryan Rashed, and I believe that the value that I'm adding to the world is inner strength.
Yum.
Why?
What I do mostly right now for work is what would outwardly appear as physical fitness, but for me, it has always been about inner strength and people's self-value and having value that really shines from within. That's really what I want to impute on the world at the end of the day.
I love that idea of value that shines from within. A lot of times when we think about the identity that we hold, it is very much influenced by external factors, external validation, going back to childhood. That's a whole nother conversation. And so this idea that you can hold strength from within is beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
I love it.
So you guys know what we're here to talk about. Innovation, but not in the traditional sense. So I want to start off by asking you each how you define the word innovator. So start with you, Aryan.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I think academics would lead you to believe that innovation is inextricably linked with somehow technology, and I don't know, I you just start to think like the VC world and Silicon Valley and all that, but I don't think that at all about innovation. I think innovation is, I'm going to go back to the value that we just talked about, it's about inner strength. I think it's linked with inner strength, and I think it's a value more than anything else, than something that we tangibly see on the outside that we're trying to reach. I think it's something that comes from within. And like you said, you're impacted by so many different things, like your childhood, your external influences, your culture, the people you surround yourselves with, your friends, the things you read, media, all of that. But I think innovation is really about, it's something that really comes from within, and it obviously becomes owned and perfected over time. But I think it's a path of self-growth and a journey for oneself to discover not only something for the world, but for themselves as well.
I like that. So that innovation is really about the person, and perhaps by extension, an innovator is that person who's on a journey to self-discovery and to discovery of what they can add to the world. I like that. Nadia, how do you define the term innovator?
So to me, an innovator is someone who's willing to question, to look at things and see possibility of something else or something different. So I don't think that it's possible to necessarily do that if you are just accepting things as they are, or looking at things and seeing them for what they are with no questioning process or sort of like an inquiry process.
Mhm.
And then from there, being able to envision another reality or another possibility and going after it. I totally agree with you with what you were saying around, like, I think you mentioned like the tools or like being able to take action on it. So yeah, that would be my combination.
So an innovator, in your opinion, is someone who's a bit of a disruptor, someone who's curious, who's questioning, who doesn't accept the world the way that we see it.
Because for me, acceptance, it means something.
Yeah.
And I actually believe that it's possible to innovate while still accepting things as they are.
Interesting.
So there's an opportunity for me as an innovator to say, okay, I see this, I accept the reality as it is, and it doesn't end there. Like, and I can envision or create something different through my actions. And I can see what the other possibilities are, and I want to explore or create or innovate.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I want to disrupt.
Yeah,
sure.
So Nadia, you described yourself as an innovator.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you a similar question.
Yeah.
But talk to us for a moment about that journey, if there was one, to embodying being an innovator. Like, did you wake up, like, as a child, did you say, I am an innovator?
Absolutely. My first words as a child was innovator. No,
exactly. So somewhere along the line, you came to this self-acceptance or this identity that you say, I am an innovator. And that's not something that we often hear women say, women who have diverse cultural backgrounds, which we're going to get into in a moment. So talk to us about, like, when did you discover that you were an innovator? What were the things, the signs, the indicators that said, oh, this is she?
Mm-hmm. So you might know her. I have this friend named Leigh-Ann Buchanan who would repeat to me over the years of our friendship that I was an innovator.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
Maybe not like, hey, Nadia, what are you doing? It's Saturday. Just thought you should know you're an innovator. Not like that,
yeah.
Not so directly, but over the years of knowing you, it has been actually a process of the external and slowly allowing my internal to catch up. Speaking of inner strength, right? Oh, I want to dive into that too. But I know that for myself, I realized that there were enough points that were repeating in terms of the messaging I was receiving as feedback from people around me, people that I respected, people that I admire, etc., and who were telling me things like, I think you said this 5 years ago, or have you noticed that some of the ideas you have, they're showing up now, and you said it 9 years ago, or even I have another friend, and I worked in advertising before going off on my own, so it is a very innovative industry. So kind of what's new, what's next is always what's on trend, what's gonna sell, what's gonna go is always pertinent in that industry. And I did receive feedback even in that industry at that time, like, you seem to be very consistently on the crest of the wave of understanding what's to come with the sort of like the cultural movement. So does that answer your question?
And so unpacking that a little bit, you mentioned a couple things. First, this idea that your innovation identity was a process. It's like a process of discovery where to some degree there was a reflection back into yourself, what other people can already see. Maybe even me kept telling you this, right? So, and then the other interesting thing that you mentioned, but I definitely want to elevate, was this idea that you had validation points. There were these external validation points that weren't separate from that internal process of really coming into your own identity, but there was trusted people that said you're an innovator. There was circumstances that confirmed that you're an innovator. There was these experiences that like screamed at you, I am an innovator. And I think what's interesting about that story, your story, Nadia, is that so often the world is telling us we're an innovator, but we can't see it. Like we've got like these blinders on, and I know we're going to unpack some of these blinders in the conversation, but so often like everything is saying, hey, you're an innovator, like literally like those flashing Vegas lights, and you're like, innovator? Not me. No, that's for someone else. So I want to turn the question on to you, Aryan. Are you an innovator?
I mean, I would consider myself an innovator. I think it's always something where it's such a nice compliment to also hear that. So it's every time I hear it, I'm grateful for it, and there's always an element of it that sort of surprises me as well.
Okay.
Because I think when you are making your dreams come true, there's always a sense of, how am I doing this? Is what I'm doing right? Am I around the right people? Am I doing the right thing? Because I think with success, the destination is always one of the most challenging elements of it. Because once you reach success, you begin to ask yourself those questions. Who do I need to surround myself? What more do I need to do? What is going to work? So I think there's all these different layers. So you're constantly on guard of losing that title in a way too, because it's something that you feel like you've maybe earned over time. And so you want to constantly push the boundary. I think the point that you made about, is innovation disruption? Is it change? Or is it refinement and making you more of who you are? Is also really interesting to me, that path as well. So I would consider myself an innovator, but I'm always a little cautiously optimistic about that because I want to continue to hold that status in a way as well.
What is coming up for me is something that you mentioned about being cautious and surprised. And when I talk to people about this idea of the innovation identity, so much of these conversations hone in on imposter syndrome, which is like the keywords of imposter syndrome are like surprise or like this idea that there's an upward limit. I think Gay Hendricks talks about this, like the upward limit to success, that like there's a certain point that you reach that you can't be an innovator anymore, right? And so I want to just unpack for a moment. Tell me, but use an example, a specific experience, like when you had or have imposter syndrome moments around your identity as an innovator. I'll share very briefly for me, and this is like what opens the book, which you both have read the excerpt, which was when I was going to start, I was interviewing for my job to take the role as the founding ED of Venture Cafe. And I was prepping with someone who I trust and I've got a great relationship with. And someone else said to me, like, what do you know about innovation? Like, you're a lawyer. And I was like, you're right. My identity is locked up as a lawyer. And so what could I possibly know about innovation? Fast forward, I now think that I'm an innovator. I mean, most people would probably say that I'm an innovator, and I probably would have been an innovator all along. But I had such imposter syndrome because I didn't think that that title of innovator related to me. Like Black woman, lawyer, no experience in tech. That is not an innovator. So talk to like, I'll start with you and I'll go back to you. Like, tell me an experience around imposter syndrome and this innovation identity. Did you have one? Have you not had one? I'm just curious.
I mean, I think I always had a sense in me that I always wanted to make things better, in whether it was like culturally at home, whether it was at work. I always had this urge to want to make things better, to create, particularly when it came, like when I started in business, particularly when it came to the customer experience. I really relished in this idea that I could like have a wow experience for clients in a way. So I was really excited about that. But everything that I had learned prior to opening a business was really just experiential. You know, like you go to hotels or you have these experiences when you travel and you see all these different experiences. But just like you, I also had a law degree and then quick pivot, into business. And, and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. I don't think I had necessarily the same mindset that I have today going into a business. Because at that time I was just like, yeah, this is a crazy decision after law school and after, taking the bar, but, I'm going to go for it. But I think for me, I think that probably hit me somewhere around when I opened my first location, and I realized that I wanted to create this customer experience, and I knew what it was, but I've never really, other than a client in the legal industry, I've never had a customer in this capacity. And I didn't really know the foggiest idea about operations and building teams and leadership. Although I had examples around me, and I immersed myself in as many business books I could possibly read.
Yes.
It's just that I just had this moment where I said to myself, like, can I make it to that level? And what is it? I think looking back then, I would have said you are an innovator in that moment, but I didn't have the confidence yet to believe in myself that what I was doing. And as many people as that surround you tell you like what you're doing is great. Wow, this isn't it. Until you believe it, it's kind of a hard thing. It's like almost this self-acceptance of innovation. And it's challenging, I think, because I think when everybody else sees around you and you don't see it in yourself in the moment, it's sort of hard to accept. It's only in moments where I think you have time to slow down and, really think about these things, meditate about them, or be grateful about them. Do you realize, okay, how far you've come? I think as innovators, we look so much into our teams, and we want it to be a collective process. And sometimes taking the credit for that is, it can be challenging at times.
Yeah. Before I go to you, Nadia, to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, and I know we've talked about this a lot. What you said, Aryan, about until you believe it for yourself, it's really hard to kind of step into. Part of what I dive into in this currency of innovation, to your point, Aryan, is this idea of creative capital, which is the empowerment. I don't think your identity as an innovator works unless you have this creative capital, which is your ability to actually create something, which starts with yourself. You got to feel empowered. And so many times people can have the best ideas in the world, the best cheerleaders, the best platform, the greatest product market fit. But if they don't believe that they have the ability and the capacity and the confidence to execute, and more importantly, if they haven't developed the skills and the tools to develop personal resilience, it's going to fail. It always will fail. So I think that's an important piece to highlight, which is it's not just about what you have and who's around you. It's very much about your mindset and how you see yourself as an innovator. Talk to me about imposter syndrome. Where do we start?
All day, every day. All day, every day. I'm serious. It's something that I live. It's alive in me all the time. And I will say I do a dance, I feel like, every moment of every day, especially as someone who considers themselves an artist, a creative. That's just my natural way of being in the world. And the acquisition of skills and tools will help reduce the imposter syndrome. But I almost feel like if I'm not feeling a little bit of it, am I really even going all the way that I can go? Like a part of me, yeah, I'm serious.
You get used to it.
Yes, maybe that's what you were talking about with the personal resiliency aspect, or like the capacity to hold that. So in order to even be in the space where I can entertain like imposter syndrome, I mean, I have imposter syndrome right now as I'm talking to the two of you. Like, you know what I mean? But that doesn't stop me from being here. That doesn't stop me from, so there's enough happening all at once in me that allows for the space to show up anyway and be like, well, what is, again, for me, it's a commitment to a possibility and vision. So like, okay, well, so what's possible? Okay, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna have a beautiful conversation with two amazing people and see where it goes. So I don't think, for me, I feel like almost like a healthy dose of imposter syndrome can be good. And I also just want to name that in this day and age, especially as a woman, especially as a person of color, especially as also an artist, there's so much messaging from the external world saying you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough, that it can be, that's also something where it's important to navigate that in order to get to a place where you can use imposter syndrome almost like as a litmus test, while still going after growth or innovation or action.
And it's interesting that you say that, because in your response around imposter syndrome, you've highlighted the coping mechanism, like the solution, which is often in spite of, she persists, right? And the fact that part of this innovation identity process is naming the imposter syndrome, naming the roadblock, and then allowing yourself to not be defined by it and allowing yourself to overcome it because you have a greater purpose. And that is the thing that you are seeking to add value to the world. That is the inner strength. That is what you're putting out there. You also mentioned, Nadia, something interesting, which was the messaging and the narrative around whether or not you can, can't. But I also think part of our messaging comes from our cultural context.
Absolutely.
Right? And we are 3 diverse women who are innovators, because we've established that, but also come from pretty distinct kind of cultural backgrounds. So we'll start with you, because you had a really interesting cultural background. I also want to go to you, but talk to me a little bit about, in your story of origin, as you grew up, what were the cultural positive and negative influences around who you are today as an innovator? Because culture can bode both ways, right? So talk to me about at least one positive, one negative influence on your identity as an innovator.
So first I'll speak to what the actual background is.
Yes.
So I'm a mix of 2 very similar yet different heritages. My mother is from Morocco, my father's from Colombia, and I grew up in Miami, Florida, which is where we're located now. So not born, but definitely raised here since I was like 3 and a half. And that meant that, I'm like, where do I even start? There's so much. So I think already having Miami as a hometown means that one aspect of my heritage was, I'll say, accepted, which is the Colombian side. And it was, when I was younger, it was not as common. But now there's more people from that country that are here now. So there was a certain acceptance of what the norm was in the world. I also will say that I would be monocultured a lot, and people would be very confused around my ability to speak Spanish or inability to speak it because it's not super strong, and why was I speaking French? And so for more context, there's a third layer, or a fourth, I'm not sure where we're at anymore, which is that the place where my parents met was in France. So French culture also informed how I grew up a lot as well, because that's where they connected. And then, so there's an acceptance. And then where it held me back, I mean, I hate to speak this broadly, but in my scenario, I did have a different way of thinking than what is the US American cultural norm. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes, even in my household, were the words like, out there is the United States and here somewhere else. Like, we have our own thing happening in here. And I actually don't want to name too many. There's pros and cons within that too, but there were moments where I really felt that was working like as a disadvantage for me, because I just felt so fragmented that I almost felt like, well, where am I supposed to navigate? Where do I belong? These types of questions. Did that answer your question?
I think that we often forget how much our cultural backgrounds inform how we begin to think about ourselves. For example, I had the same conversation in my household, first generation. And my mother would always say, like, you're not like these North American kids. Like, you are Jamaican and this is how we do things. And like, grades are important. But I also think to some degree, it helped propel me into a certain profession and dissuade me from doing other maybe creative or innovative things. Now, I had a background in music, which you know, and I don't know if you knew that, but I went to performing arts school. It was always accepted that you do this, but not as a career. Like, creativity isn't a career, it is a hobby. And that's, I think, like how the culture informed my even ability to think about myself as innovative. Because like, no, lawyers are not innovative. My sister went to med school. Doctors are not innovative. They can do things on the side, but it's not like part of their identity. So Aryan, talk to us a little bit about like your cultural background and maybe the pros and cons about how that shaped your identity as an innovator.
Yeah, so I'm Iranian American. I was born in the US. Both of my parents were born in Iran. I think, really interesting stuff. I think one of, the cultural issues is that, as you mentioned in your own way, many issues are dealt in-house. So we were taught sort of early, like, keep the emotions bottled up, don't ask people for help, you can do this by yourself. I think those things are good in a way because it teaches you sort of like, fight for yourself, and that not everything has to be on public display. But the challenges come, I think, when you start to think about how you really do innovate, and that usually comes in teams. And that usually shows vulnerability, which is something that I think, in my experience, that's not something that we show easily, vulnerability. And so that was, for me, this is through business, this is the first time that I am, able to expose myself, emotionally and business-wise, what I call the top and bottom 5% that we normally don't share with other people, but we may share with the really close people around us. I think, those are challenging. I think one of the good things about my culture is that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like you hear all these successful entrepreneurs talk about how education meant nothing to them and school means nothing to them and university means nothing to them. Well, I just have a really opposite experience. Yeah. Education really did frame the way I think about business. It really did help me grow. I think the legal process, it's not always easy to understand customer service when your legal mind is thinking about fair and unfair. So I hear that out. But I think, having the skill set to be able to even take risks is important because, again, culturally also, Jamaica, like what you were mentioning, Jamaican culture too, is like doctor, lawyer, which we have in the family as well as sister and sister, we're the same path. But it's not that you shouldn't take the risk. It's more like, do you have something to fall back on? Yeah. Is sort of like where we sort of stood on that. And so for me, education has been a really valuable resource in terms of connectivity to the community, and also to, like, everybody pretty much comes and supports the business right now are friends and a network of people that I know here. Yeah. So education is not just about what you read in books. It's about the people that you connect with. It's about the resilience. It's about the failures and the successes. So for me, I think, there were some positives and negatives, but, overall, if you can kind of frame it the right way, you learn from both.
I'm an innovator, but if I'm being honest with you, I couldn't always call myself an innovator. I've spent the better part of a decade launching and leading projects designed to help everyday people access their innovation potential. It's included projects that have unlocked over $75 million for things that bridge gaps in access, opportunity, and equity. When I transitioned from being a trial attorney to leading organizations in the innovation space, what I really needed was a guide to help me answer two critical questions. Am I an innovator? And what type of innovator am I? The problem is that our society and our own identity serve as barriers to keep our powerful potential as innovators locked away and hidden. Innovation Currency is the book that is designed to help you discover your hidden innovator. If you've ever wondered what innovation looks like for you, how you might use innovation in your day-to-day life, or how you can use innovation to help solve some of the most pressing challenges in the world, or even your workplace or community, then please grab your copy of Innovation Currency, because I can assure you that after reading it, you'll have the tools, the experience, and the translatable skills to unlock your hidden innovator. To find out where you can purchase your copy in whatever format makes sense for you, scroll down to the show notes for the appropriate links. So as we think about innovation, vulnerability is not something that comes up often. But what you said, which was interesting, is that the relationships that you've developed, your team, your patrons, your trusted friends, that has made the difference for you, both in business and probably also in your identity as an innovator, as a leader. So I want to dig into that a little bit more, which is to ask, what have you learned about the power of relationships?
Well, they're everything. Relationships are really everything. And I think, and I can give you a good example. During the COVID experience, my business was probably one of the most impacted businesses. Brick and mortar fitness was one of the most hard hit industries probably out there. It was a full shutdown, and you had to get on your feet quick in terms of engaging your clients. Our team has kind of always been out on our own, and we've always been our own brand. We've always done our own thing. And we had another fitness concept approach us, who on the outside, we look like competitors in every single way. And they approached a conversation with us that said, hey, we're both in this space right now that we both own brick and mortar, fitness facilities. By the way, we have the same clients. By the way, we're both, it was both, gloves all off, everybody sitting at the table. And they said, what do you think about working together through this? And it was it was both of us being vulnerable about not just our numbers, because I think that was obvious, but sort of the first time I think both teams have faced panic, fear, hitting, maybe numbers that we had not seen before. It's very different to be experiencing, hyper growth or growth year by year, or being profitable from day one and not having to worry about anything. It's a very different experience to be in full shutdown mode, and really your brain thinks differently. Your whole essence of everything about you begins to think differently. So I think both teams being really vulnerable in that moment allowed for a collaboration. So we went from competition to collaboration, and then as a result, both of our member databases both went up, and we both did better, and our teams ended up locking in with each other and liking each other. So it was a blending of culture as well. So I think, and as a result, this goes back to your point about relationships. First of all, that conversation was a relationship. And then not only that, as leaders of our leaders, our leadership team strengthened together. So now our leadership team talks to their leadership team about problems they have on a daily basis that have nothing to do with the pandemic. But it's allowed, we talk about highs and lows both together. So I think those moments of vulnerability and being able to demystify things that I think we're not supposed to necessarily, we're told we're not supposed to talk about in front of other people, really strengthened not just our businesses, but our relationship with one another. Certainly my perspective of the true spirit of collaboration and community. It completely changed my perspective of community.
What are the values that you share with your new collaborators? Because when I think about this, a lot of times we're talking, and in the book I say social capital, but it's all about relationships, right? And with relationships, I think you can have transactional exchanges, but what you're describing is really a relationship. Business, yes, but there's intimacy, there's vulnerability, there's gotta be some shared values if you have cohesion of cultures from the top level through the team. So what are some of those core values that you share that engendered trust among you?
I mean, I think the first one is the ability to listen. We did a lot of that during the pandemic. Let me tell you, we became really, really great listeners because the landscape of our businesses completely changed. We had to do a lot of listening to the customers. We had to do a lot of listening to the government. We had to do a lot of listening to different layers of the government who all had competing and conflicting orders that were going on. And then so it was this really interesting moment for us. And this is coming from being a lawyer, where we saw the law was actually less conservative for the first time than business. Mm-hmm. I'd never seen it like that. So these were new waters for us. The ability to listen came first and foremost. Empathy came second, because we had to really put ourselves in the customer's shoes to understand what was going on, and really and by the way, beyond political, really just understanding the fear, and the concerns of the clients as well, and then also kindness. I think we both operate with a sense of kindness and respect for the people that work for us. Mm-hmm. So I have one shared value that we have is that no matter what level of the organization you work with, that you work on, everyone is treated the same way. Mm-hmm. And that is so very important to me, that we take care of, the people that are cleaning the machines, to the people that are handling our marketing, to the people who are making top level decisions. That's very important to me. And I think to have two teams come in that moment and be able to share those values, there's a tremendous amount of synergy, but there's also a lot of intangibles for a business that you can't put necessarily a dollar amount or a value on, despite revenue increases or membership database or any of that stuff. There's a lot of intangibles that come with that as well.
And I think when we talk about relationships, and I love every element of what you just said, but what stands out is the last piece, which is the intangibles. When we think about the relationship process, a lot of times we know opens doors. Like, relationships are what open doors of opportunity. It's what creates opportunity. And it's not just the first time you meet someone, it's that cultivated, repetitive, intentional investment in a relationship that really, in my opinion, is an important aspect of who you are as an innovator. And I would say the most innovative people I know too, which are sitting here, are people that embody, relationship building, but also this intangible piece, which you've clearly identified, but sometimes just goes without notice. Like, it just kind of is there in the background until we elevate it and really think about what are those intangible pieces that make for a really deep and mutually beneficial and fulfilling partnership. So Nadia, in your work as an innovator, what are the values that you look for in people that you are building relationships with? Because you work very collaboratively, if you'll talk about that, with a lot of different folks. And so what are the things that you're looking for? What are the things that you're looking to resonate?
I would actually say, so I loved how Aryan was like, everything is relationships, or relationships are everything, something like that. And for me, I feel at this point in time in my life that everything is relational. Mm-hmm. And something that I look for all the time is whether or not someone has a relationship with themselves and what that relationship is like, because that is going to inform how they show up for other people. Our capacity ends with us. And what you hit the nail on the head. I work extremely collaboratively. At this point, I do very little on my own, and it's by design, because that is, going back, something that comes from both the Moroccan culture and the Colombian culture is the power of being in a group, the power of being in community, and what that can, you can go further together, right? And so beyond anything, it's someone who has a healthy relationship with themselves. And then that way I can see how they choose to relate with others. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the most important thing.
So it's almost as though, it's funny, when I was thinking about how do you define social capital, I have this equation that says social capital is trust in shared values, plus cultivated intimacy, which means you're always thinking about how you build intimacy. But something that you said is that it also is a reflection of yourself, right? You are looking to see and build and collaborate with something that resonates with who you are. And you know how they say, like, hurt people hurt people. I think the same thing goes on the positive side. People who have a deep relationship with self have the capacity, as you say, to build deep relationships with other people. And I think that is part and parcel to really innovation. A lot of times I describe it as a social process. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. You guys know this is the work that I've been doing for the last little while. It's very much a social process. And it's very much a social process that is fueled by collaboration, fueled by trust. And a lot of times it's fueled by storytelling. Like, I think the narrative piece, the culture, and the stories that we see, the stories that we're exposed to are help us define the way that we build connection. So where I wanted to shift to for a moment was to ask you both about who is the, I guess, the prototype of an innovator to you? Like, who comes to mind? Who's like thinking about the, was it, I think the Outcast song? The Prototype, right? Mm-hmm. Who is that to you? Exactly. Who do you think about when you hear the term innovator? And be honest, if it's, not yourself, if it's like, what do you think about first?
Someone that I'm actually collaborating with comes to mind. Their name is Andrea Renee Johnson, and they're doing business very, very differently. It's just fascinating and inspiring how they are interacting and creating and putting out like their idea for the world to interact with, but then completely in a collaborative way, completely centering humanity, I would say. That's how it feels like for me. And in their vision, it's a school called Whole Self Liberation. And within that, I'm one of the teachers teaching Reclaiming Your Creativity. And it's just, I don't know how else to describe it, but right now that's someone that I look up to quite a bit in terms of engaging in business, engaging with people, engaging with their own vision, and engaging in a relational way, like on every level.
Mm-hmm. And I want to go to you so you get more time to answer, like think about the question. But what's interesting about the example that you gave is someone who even uses the pronouns they. Mm-hmm. And when you think about the people that are like the moniker of innovation, it's not often non-binary. It's not often women of color. It's not often people with diverse cultural backgrounds, first generation folks that are children of immigrants. It's often the stereotypical kind of white male startup guy that is who we are told is an innovator. And I think for me, that has a lot to do with why we don't see more people like us claiming I am an innovator, because we don't have those exposure points and those narratives. But who is the prototype for you?
I think there's two, but I think I always think back to the entrepreneur who really comes from nothing, in a way, who starts with nothing or starts with a really crazy idea to everybody else, but kind of has this like spark in them. There's some kind of spark in them, that a sense of resilience, a sense of it's okay if people don't accept me for who I am or what I want to do. I'm still going to push that boundary. But it's also, and for me, male or female, I love Sarah Blakely because, she took underwear, and created an empire out of it. But it's really not about underwear. She's all about self-love, accepting your body, and about women empowerment. She's big into philanthropy and helping young women business entrepreneurs as well, because she recognizes that we are very underserved in the VC market, that we are often neglected and don't get a chance to even have these conversations, whether or not we have a great product or a great idea or not. So she, embodies a lot for me because she's also had a lot of fun with the process too. Like she looks back at herself and she laughs at herself when she says like, I had no team, but I had Oprah, and she was going to tape at my house. So I went and got a group of friends to do this, for me and pretend I had a team. But she really she went for it.
Yeah.
And everybody thought she was silly for this idea, but it was a dream of hers. And she says, I had a backpack and $5,000, and that's what I went for. And then the added element of the prototype is something I think I got from my parents was that no matter how much success or fame or money you may have, you need to learn how to do, you need to do the right thing at the end of the night.
Yeah.
That when you go to bed at night, if there's a decision that's bothering you, that's probably for a reason. And not to carry that through the night, but it's about doing the right thing. And it's not always easy to do the right thing. Yeah. There's not emotions attached to it. But when you're in business, you're not just responsible for yourself, you're responsible for a lot of people. And so I have often been claimed to be unpopular at times, or, that I kind of go against the grain for certain things that may make me look a certain way in front of people, but I have to do the right thing at the end of the day. That's not always short-term gratification, but it always seems to serve me in the long term. Hey. So I think, part of it is like the vision and being able to see, somebody powerful, particularly in a male-dominated world where, it's funny the way I think people speak about money with our gender. It's always like a surprise to see this, but it's fun to, and it's fun for me to celebrate women who can, it's again to see success in what they've done and to see success in themselves and to appreciate that, but also just to make sure that you do the right thing at the end of the day.
I think when you say, and I'm going to reach for our special lightning round.
Okay.
But I think when you say do the right thing, that keeps coming up in these conversations, because to me, when I think about innovation, it is not about, what you can do for yourself. I think the question is like, not ask what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. Let's take that applied to innovation, not ask what innovative things can do for you, but like what you can do for the world, for humanity. And that requires, as your parents told you, and I know that you continue to do, to think beyond self and do the right thing. And I think part of this identity of an innovator is thinking about the responsibility to do for others. That's actually why we're having this conversation, is because I wish conversations like this existed. I wish, my favorite quote is by Shel Silverstein, and it says, if there's a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written, write it. Like, that's why I wrote the book, because I did not see the book that I wanted to read. And in a way that made sense, that resonated with regular people, no offense to the Ivy Leagues or people like us that have gone to law school and practiced law or have been educated, but regular folks that have the capacity. So diving in as we close out our conversation with a couple of quick round questions.
Okay.
So my first one is about flow. When do you most feel in flow?
When do I most feel in flow? That for me is definitely the morning. I'm an early riser. I don't know if I get up as early as you do, but because I've heard some stories here. But 4:30 has always been my jam.
Yep.
And I can remember it since I was really young. I was definitely annoying as a kid. I played piano actually as well.
Really?
That early in the morning in a house where you could hear it. So I know I was annoying. But my flow has always been in the morning. It makes me feel calm.
Yeah.
To get up in the morning, to feel that the world is at peace. I can get ahead of life. I can do my own workout on my own. And really also take some time to be grateful. Yeah. Because I think through the chaos of my day, and I think especially in the early years of at least the business startup, it was just, I would just wake up and answer emails. And that was just the way I started every morning. But now I've had some time to do different things. So it's definitely in the morning.
What about you?
I'm gonna try and throw in a different answer, but I'm also a morning person.
Yeah.
But I would say for me, I mean, I experience flow not just in the morning. I suppose my flow in the morning is just for me. But anytime I'm doing a creative act, I feel in flow. So that could be anything from cooking something, painting something, playing music, even being in conversation with it like this, like in a room like this one, I can feel that flow just from the act of creating.
Yeah. So in the book, I talk a lot about superpowers. And I think that those are what drive innovation, is not just having them, because everybody's got them, like they're like pronouns, but like knowing what your superpowers are. And I always say you should know your top 3, but we'll just ask you, what's your number 1 superpower? Start with you.
Normally for the record, my easy reach is creativity, because my whole life is art, basically.
But go deeper.
But I would say at this point in my life, it's nurturing. Nurturing self, nurturing others, nurturing community. I really understand that there's a depth that can happen, that I can create some space for, not just for me, but for others to feel comfortable to get uncomfortable. And that can be extremely valuable as we do things, we innovate, we disrupt, we create. So I'd say that's my number 1.
I agree. I think like when I think about you, not just in your work, but you are someone that both designs and holds space for growth. For sure. What about you? What's your number 1 superpower?
I would say, and I think I'm proud of this one, I would say that I'm a good picker of friends.
Get it.
I always say this because every time I introduce a friend to another friend, they're like, how do you have such an amazing friend? And it's really fun to know that, to have this, like, I always say that I always say this, but I always say that I won the friend lottery. Because I don't think as a person, I don't know, maybe people always talk to me about having, certain types of friends. And I'm like, I just don't have that. I just don't have that around me. And part of that is being able to recognize some things that I don't like also very quickly about a person. So I think I can read people pretty well and those that I really love. I choose to bring it into my life and hope that they accept me the same way. But as a result, it has ended up in a really powerful and dynamic female network of friends and males too. But I'm lucky that I'm surrounded by such strong female positivity and empowered women. Really.
Definitely. You have a spot on barometer for the soul.
I like that.
For sure. So the last question is, why does the world need innovators?
Well, I think it really is our duty to humanity to change, in some ways, the status quo, because the status quo, and like I said, there's some innovators that go and they make things better and they refine a process, and that's great. That also helps the world. But I think that we can't leave the world as it is for future generations on so many hosts of different levels, from including the environment as well. I think it's our duty, and it's sort of our right, I believe, as human beings on this earth, to leave it better off than we found it. So my belief is that it's more of a duty, not a benefit that we have been given. I think we've been given, each iteration of generations have been given better resources, let's call it better technology, better advances, and it's our job to continue to innovate that process and to make it better off for future generations, but without sacrificing relationships, but without sacrificing how we learned and how we process emotions. I think those are really 2 big important things for us not to forget, because I think we are moving lightning speeds in wonderful directions. We have to still think about that we are still human beings, people with emotions and feelings, and I think we can't really lose sight of that.
I do believe that the way the world is, as it is right now, it's not healthy. There's an integration process that gets to happen, and I feel that today the innovators of this moment, those who are understanding that there's the relational, there is the human aspect that's been extracted from the equation, it just gets to get poured right back in. And so, yeah, we need folks who have that are in touch with that aspect of themselves to sort of push the envelope and get us to the next point, even if it takes more generations, because let's be real, some folks have been working on it for many generations already.
Indeed. Well, guys, thank you so much
Thank you.
for this conversation. And keep on innovating.